In the Olivet Discourse, Jesus said, "Because of the increasing of lawlessness, the love of the greater number will grow cold." Has there been an increasing of lawlessness since the year 1914? When we read or watch news reports of horrific crimes, or if you've been a victim of crime yourself, it could be quite easy to believe that our generation is worse than any that preceded it. Those who believe that the last days begin in 1914 have said, since 1914, there is an increasing of lawlessness on a magnitude unlike any period in history. And it is true, past generations had criminals too, but never before has crime been seen as pervasive as it is now. However horrific a crime can be in our modern era, were things better before 1914? What do the experts say? The book, The Growth of Crime, says, a longer view, peering into the Middle Ages or even the 18th century, might well give more substance to the theory. With all our crime, our society as a whole is more secure, less savage than theirs. The mere fact that towns had to be walled, that castles had to provide refuge for the surrounding villagers and their belongings, that travelers had to take their own protection with them, bears witness to the constant threat of brigands as well as the needs of warfare. John Bellamy, in the book Crime and Public Order in England in the later Middle Ages, says, in the most modern Western societies, the level of crime that has been so reduced that the misdeeds of the few serve rather to provide the ordinary citizen with escapist entertainment than to instill a sense of fear. The book Freakonomics says, consider the historical trend in homicide, not including wars, which is both the most reliably measured crime and the best barometer of a society's overall crime rate. These statistics, compiled by criminologist Manuel Eisner, track historical homicide levels in 5 European regions. The steep decline of these numbers over the centuries suggests that for one of the gravest human concerns, getting murder, the incentives that we collectively cook up are working better and better. Steven Pinker said in A History of Violence, social histories of the West provide evidence of numerous barbaric practices that became obsolete in the last 5 centuries, such as slavery, amputation, blinding, branding, flaying, disembowelment, burning at the stake, breaking on the wheel, and so on. Meanwhile, for another kind of violence, homicide, the data are abundant and striking. The criminologist Manuel Eisner has assembled hundreds of homicide estimates from Western Europe localities that kept records at some point between 1200 and the mid-1990s. In every country he analyzed, murder rates declined steeply. For example, from 25 homicides per 100,000 Englishmen in the 14th century to 0.6 per 100,000 by the early 1960s. The work, Long-Term Historical Trends in Violent Crime, states, research on the history of crime from the 13th century until the end of the 20th has burgeoned and has greatly increased understanding of historical trends in crime and crime control. Serious interpersonal violence decreased remarkably in Europe between the mid-16th and early 20th centuries. Different long-term trajectories in the decline of homicide can be distinguished between various European regions. Age and sex patterns in serious violent offending, however, have changed very little over several centuries. The long-term decline in homicide rates seem to go along with a disproportionate decline in elite homicide and a drop in male-to-male conflicts in public space. A range of theoretical explanations for the long-term decline have been offered, including the effects of the civilizing process, strengthening state powers, the Protestant Reformation, and modern individualism, but most theorizing has been post ad hoc. When compared to centuries ago, there has been a long-term decline in homicides and other crimes. Since 1914, each nation or region has seen fluctuations of increasing and decreasing statistics. For instance, since the 1990s especially, violent crime in many parts of the world has been on the decline. What the future holds for any given locality is impossible to predict, but in comparison to centuries past, lawlessness is not what it used to be. What about the attitudes and morals of people today as compared to previous generations? One prominent thinker said, "What is happening to our young people? They disrespect their elders. They disobey their parents. They ignore the law. They riot in the streets inflamed with wild notions. Their morals are decaying. What is to become of them?" Who said this? The 4th century BC philosopher Plato. Some 4 centuries earlier, Hesiod complained, "I see no hope for the future of our people if they are dependent on frivolous youth of today. For certainly all youth are reckless beyond words. When I was young, we were taught to be discreet and respectful of our elders, but the present youth are exceedingly disrespectful and impatient of restraint." If we are inclined to believe that in our times morals are worse than at any time in human history, we would do well to keep in mind that people in ancient times believed the same thing.